Welcome back to the McCoy Leadership Podcast, elevating your impact through valuable insights and conversations about leadership. Welcome back to the McCoy Leadership Podcast, and today we have Traci Austin back with us. We had Traci on not too long ago, and we talked after our podcast and said, hey, we're going to get back on here, and we had some ideas about some things that we wanted to talk about, but after Traci kind of gives a little bit of a brief introduction of herself, we'll get into what we're really going to talk about today and some of the things that have been going on here in my local area and with me. So Traci, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend with our listeners and to spend with me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me back.
Absolutely. So just to remind our listeners, tell our listeners just a little bit about kind of what you specialize in and a little bit about how you got to where you are.
Yeah. So we specialize in working with trade organizations on really building that culture. And we're going to talk a little bit today about belonging and the impact of leadership. And we're very focused on how do we enroll our employees from day one and really have them feel a part of an organization from that first day, then also how they grow inside of organizations. And so we've been doing this now for over 20 years. And, why do we do what we do? Because people matter. And if we're fulfilled and in communities that there's belonging, it has a huge impact on our quality of life and on the organization's success.
So you just said it, communities that you feel belonging in. And so first and foremost for our listeners, I don't know when this will be released, but I want to be clear that this is the first podcast that I've recorded in almost 3 weeks. And the reason for that is not because I chose that I wanted to take a break. We had a tragedy. I had a tragedy that happened here just a few weeks ago. I started my day out just like any normal day on a Monday morning. I have a standing 8:30 a.m. Meeting not too far from where I live here in the town of Hagerstown. And as I left my office, I came here first to prepare for the day, as I always do. And as I left the office to head down the road, I having a normal day, just, had plenty of time, headed down the road, thinking about, do I stop and get a cup of coffee? What's on the agenda for the meeting today? All of those things. And as I was headed down the road, I got to kind of a rural area, and something happened. I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. As I saw that movement, I realized that there was a child coming out in the road in front of me, and I hit that child. That child did not survive. And at that moment, everything stopped. I was no longer thinking about a meeting. I was no longer thinking about a cup of coffee. I was no longer even thinking about work whatsoever. And this tragic event, which was a horrible accident and I did not mention, and I did not know at that point in time, but I found out later that she was only a little over 1 year old. And so to think through that, you would immediately think, there's going to be turmoil, there's going to be chaos, there's going to be all of these things. And what happened was just, in my opinion, remarkable. It was evident that this was an accident. It was also very evident of how much this family loved all of their children, including this young girl. With all of that being said, this family recognized as well that I had just had a traumatic experience, and they, in the midst of all of this, God called them to also comfort me at that moment in time. So although everything felt like the world had come to a standstill, this family, amidst their loss, was also concerned and worried about my well-being, as well as making sure that I understood that they had no blame, that this was by the hand of God in their mind. And it was such a bizarre accident that they knew that it was divine and that they had no blame and that I should not blame myself. And throughout this process, I went to the viewing, which was very tough to make the decision to go. I wasn't sure that I was ready for that. I wasn't sure that I wanted to see all of those people. But God moved me to do that. And it was probably one of the most healing experiences that I've ever experienced in my life. The family and the community was so just forthright in, as I came in, there were people there that knew me. There were people that were hugging me. The family was all very happy that I had come because they felt that it would be good for all of us. And going through this experience, as we, made that walk and I kind of became part of their family in some way, I realized how important the idea of grace was. And the one thing, I made a mistake early on as I was talking to some, that I said that this family had amazing grace and forgiveness for me. And that mistake was that I said they had forgiveness for me. And one of the things that was pointed out was they have never forgiven me because they never blamed me. And so we have accidents, we have things that happen, we have bad times at work, we have bad employees, we have good employees that have bad things. All of those things exist. But I think one of the things that helps to create community that I realize more now than ever is that grace, that ability to be able to stand with people even in their time of need when you have a time of need. Any of our listeners know from time to time it comes up. I am a Christian. I have a strong faith, but I will tell you that my faith is stronger today than it was 3 weeks ago. And I think that is remarkable that such a tragic event can be turned around to be faith building, to be good. And I think this story of grace is one of those things that it needs to be told. Several years ago, there was a shooting in Pennsylvania here, not far from us in Lancaster County, where a milk truck driver, went in and the mass shooting within an Amish school. And most people know that part of the story. They may remember it from the news, but what they don't know is what happened next. And I would encourage anybody to read the book. I believe it's titled Forgiveness. But what happened next was that Amish community went to this man's wife, went to this man's mother and father, and took care of them. And they made sure that they understood that there was no blame towards them, that these things happen, and that's no bearing on those other people. So with all of that, what I think we can kind of unpack is start to talk about grace within the workplace and within the community and within leadership. One of the things that came to mind to me so much was, as I thought about this, the number of times that maybe we hold a grudge over anything. It could be that we made a hire and that hire didn't turn out to be quite as good as we thought they were. And so rather than look for the reasons or give that grace and try to find a pathway forward, we hold a grudge, or it could be a failed project. Whatever the case may be, I think we need, as leaders, we need to strive to figure out ways to stand beside people, even if it is and maybe they're a bad fit, and maybe we're not gonna keep them. That might be a time that they need us more than any other, that we can continue to stand beside them, try to find a better fit for them, try to find a company in our region that they would be a good fit for. So now I've talked a lot more than what I typically do in my interviews. But Traci, what thoughts do you have at this point?
Absolutely. What I love about the conversation about grace is that it actually starts with grace with ourselves, I believe. Before we can have grace for someone else, we have to have grace with ourselves. And when we create a community, so often what we project on others, we haven't yet been able to create within ourselves for ourselves. And I love to start there within that grace, because I think grace is something we're not really taught how to do. It doesn't necessarily come up in conversation unless you're in coaching or therapy or something else, right? So it's like, what is that grace, for yourself, whether it is for making a bad hire or whether it is, you said something that you're regretting saying to someone, or there's a terrible accident and it's okay. What's the grace that I can have for myself for being in the wrong spot at the wrong time, and yet allowing the gifts that actually come out of that?
So, one thing you mentioned, one piece of that I want to touch on real quick, and it's probably one of the most important pieces, and I don't want to, just gloss over it, but that isn't maybe where we're headed with this. But you mentioned, you maybe don't get to some of these conversations unless you're in therapy or counseling or something of that nature. And I want to be clear that although I'm talking about this and I might seem okay, anytime somebody has a traumatic experience, it is okay to seek out counseling, advice. I'm a leadership person. Some would call me maybe a leadership expert. I coach people. I work with people on a daily basis. That doesn't mean that I can work with myself. So I, have enrolled in some counseling. I'm working through our church with many of the elders. Any of those pathways are good pathways, and I just want to make sure that I'm clear that, one, I'm doing that, and two, it's okay. Because
Absolutely.
We're all human, and I think sometimes as we start to talk about grace for ourselves, sometimes we feel, specifically as men, and maybe even specifically as Christian men, that, we need to be strong enough and find our way through this. We can't go look for help. We need to be strong. Part of being strong is recognizing when you need help. So I think that's an hugely important piece. But back to your thought, looking back over 30 years of working, I would say grace for myself is not something that I have ever had. And I would agree with you. I think it starts, to offer grace. You need to have that grace for yourself. And this was one of those moments that somebody shared with me that, kind of the steps that you go through. And even at work, you got this really big project. It's a $2.5 million project, and it falls through. And all of a sudden, you want to take responsibility. And with the same thing with this incident, on day one in my mind, like somehow I had to take responsibility. That's what leaders do. We take responsibility for things. And somebody shared that in order to take responsibility would mean that you left your home that morning with intention of killing a 1-year-old child. Well, that's ludicrous. I didn't leave my house with that intention. And they said, if you want responsibility, that means you had intention.
Right.
Now, you can have regret, and you can regret getting in your vehicle. You can regret getting out of bed. You can regret not going to a meeting that made this deal fall through. I'm mixing the two together.
Yeah.
But the idea is that you can have regret and you can heal from regret. But if you're going to take responsibility, that's something different. And so I think that delineation of, are you responsible or are you regretful that you didn't do something or you did do something? So that was very key for me, that just recognizing that I can't take responsibility for this because I had no intention of doing anything bad. Same thing on the family's behalf. They had no intention of ill will towards their children. I mean, again, that's ludicrous. So they don't have responsibility. They have regret. And so do I. And regret is much easier to heal from, as well as regret is much easier to forgive someone or to offer that grace. So the other good thing that was said to me was somebody said they had advice shared with them at one point in time when they had lost a family member. And the person said, you have two choices. You can be bitter or you can be better. Mm-hmm. And that has stuck with me, to be bitter or to be better. Obviously, I would like to be better, not bitter.
Right.
So, and I think that's also part of that grace. Same thing applies at work. You have two choices when something goes haywire. You can get mad about it and be bitter, or you can figure out a way to see the positive or to see the change that needs to come out of that and turn it into a positive.
And I love this. I want to kind of look at this bitter and better in a larger context. And in my experience, I don't have research behind this or anything else, but in my experience, when people get bitter, they isolate. And when people get better, they become a part of something. And it's a conscious choice. Am I going to isolate and be alone and put my head down and do this work? Or am I going to get better and find that community and be a part of something? Or it might be finding another community, or, we talked about counseling, or, getting better typically happens in collaboration and in community with others. And I just want to bring that forward for folks that are thinking, well, how do you move through this? What are those steps? What does that look like? It's going to be personal, that grace with yourself. And a lot of times for me, what I find is I don't realize I don't have the grace to myself, or that it's even an option. I don't even realize that grace is an option until it's kind of pointed out, Traci, you can have grace with yourself in this.
So how many of our listeners, have you ever had something at work that went haywire, and, the next meeting that you have, you're kind of thinking in your mind, I don't really want to go in this meeting. I don't want to face these people. I don't want to, I failed. I don't want to do this. And sometimes we make a choice to go into that meeting, but even though we're in the meeting, we kind of, we avoid those topics and those things, and other people will kind of help you do that if that's the path that you want to take. And the opposite path is to say, well, that didn't work out quite as I expected, or today did not end the way I started the day or thought it was going to end. All right, group, team, whatever the case may be, how are we going to work our way through this? I and even being honest with people to say to the point of, I feel somewhat responsible for this, but we need to figure out a way to come out of this, and we need to figure out a way to get a positive out of this or to learn something from it. Many times a team is going to mimic or help that leader in whichever path they take. So if the leader is going to be isolated and mad and bitter, the team's going to help them stay isolated, mad, and bitter. And right. If they want to be better and they come into it with that standpoint, well, of course, the team is going to help them try to get better. A key point with what I have went through, I would not be having this conversation today if it wasn't for the community, the outreach, the people that have helped me to get better. Not good, but better,
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so there's so many people, hundreds of people, that have reached out, and then a smaller subgroup of that are continually reaching out on a regular basis to say, all right, how you doing today? What are you going to attack? What are you going to do? And think about the power of that. You have a team and you've now had a failure. Everybody has that same feeling, like, man, we failed.
Yeah.
So if we're reaching out on a regular basis and saying to our team members, "Hey, how you doing today? What are you going to attack? What did we learn out of this?" All of those pieces. And I really wonder, as I'm thinking through this, how much time do we spend in the workplace trying to prove that we don't need anybody's help?
Right.
There is a great documentary by it's often on the public broadcasting system, PBS, but Richard Pronicki moved to Alaska in 1968, if I have my date right, and he built a cabin with his bare hands. He filmed all of this in 1968 with a reel-to-reel camera that you wind up. And he lived there from 1968 until 1998. So 30 years in the wilderness of Alaska by himself. I mean, people came and visited, but he wrote in his journal every day. And if you want some fun reading and from a leadership standpoint, I get a lot out of his journals. At any rate, he talked about the fact that, and this was in like 1972, that we've gotten to such a point in the world where so many people are satisfied with just doing a part, just doing a piece, and they don't know how to work together to create to completion a whole project.
Right.
And he compared it to himself building his cabin. He talks at one point about going to the hardware store, which for him in the remote wilderness of Alaska was walking into the woods and looking for a piece of wood that would, fit what he needed to do. And so by us all becoming accustomed to having a piece of it, think about your business, your team, all the people around you. How many of them actually understand what the end product is? What does the big picture look like? A manufacturing plant, you might have concrete block, which is one that I'm very familiar with. You have a loader operator that loads the materials into the bin. You have a mix operator, which brings the materials out of the bin into the mixer. A machine operator, which actually makes the concrete block. Then you have a cuber operator, they're called, that palletize the finished block, and a forklift driver. So we got about 5 people that are involved. And oftentimes what I found was none of them understood where they fit into the grand picture of getting a building built that might be on Main Street. And
or they don't understand what they're actually building and the impact of how the piece that they're responsible for impacts the next.
Yes.
And that disconnection between the parts of the whole, and I do want to go back a minute, if you're okay with it, to something that you were talking about within a team. And what brought up for me was Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team. Because what you just shared with us today was incredibly vulnerable. And when we don't share and become vulnerable with our teams, we have an absence of trust. And without trust, we really can never see the different parts of it to trust that, hey, I can bring this forward. I can bring these ideas forward. I can name what's there. And, I want to bring that forward as we kind of shift into these team conversations, that what's also happening at home has a significant impact on what's happening at work. And if we're isolating at work, we're also isolating at home or in our community. And, so this pulling it together, we're truly in teams in every single aspect of our life, whether we look at it like that or not. The skill sets are the same, from grace to forgiveness to, each of these. And I just kind of wanted to pull it together for a minute.
No, you're right. And actually, if you think about it and look at the Bible, during Jesus's time on earth, very rarely did Jesus send anybody out by themselves. They were always sent out in teams.
Yeah.
And I think we're designed to be in teams, whether it's at home, in the community. And you said something I hadn't really realized, but there are some that said their advice was, well, get back to work tomorrow and, just work as hard as you can and it'll eventually get better. And to some extent, there's a little bit of truth to that, but not completely. You can't just isolate yourself at work and say, well, I'm going to work 20 hours a day until I get past this, because now not only am I isolating myself in my work, I'm isolating myself from my family.
Right.
And I will also share, as part of that, we don't realize, so this is a hugely, I think, important revelation for me. We don't realize how we affect the other people.
Significantly.
And to give an example, again, now, given, you think about what I just went through. So after I got with the family, we called 911. Some time went by. I don't know how much, but I realized I need something. And so the first phone call was to my wife. And I don't remember. I mean, I knew that I made the phone call, but I didn't remember what I said. Mm-hmm. And I called my wife, which was getting ready to go out the door for her daily run. And I caught her just as before she went out the door. And I said, according to her, I've had an accident. I killed a young girl. This is where it's at. Please come. Mm-hmm. And then my second phone call, I called our minister and I said, same kind of thing. This is what's happened. And, at some point today when I am able, I would like to, meet with you. Point being, it wasn't until Tuesday that it hit me. And I thought, what is my wife going through? Because that was a terrible phone call to receive. Then she got there. And of course, in hindsight, I maybe shouldn't have told her to come there, because by that point it was all corded off and they wouldn't let her come down. So now she's sitting at the top of the hill wondering what's going to happen. And she shared that, the road was blocked at both ends, and she had come around to the one end first, and she could see me, and said that I was walking around, with my hands on top of my head, just kind of pulling at my hair. I don't remember this, but my point is, I didn't realize until Tuesday or even think about it, because I was thinking about me and how do I get through today, because I've had this experience, all of the people that I affected with this experience. And here's, my wife that has seen these little pieces of this, received this phone call. How did that affect her? Mm-hmm. And my point is that how easy it is to think about, well, I screwed this project up, so it's my fault. But how we are acting is going to affect everybody in our team, whether that's our family, whether that's at work. And that was a huge realization to me, that everything I do and say is going to affect others. And I know this. I'm a communication expert, right? I specialize in DISC, but you still don't realize, I don't think, and I think that's an area that we all can think about, is what I'm about to say or what I'm about to do, or this failure that we've just had not only affects me, but everybody else. And so I've always said I'm not a touchy-feely type person, so to speak, like, oh, well, let's see how you feel today. That's not how I start my meetings. But maybe it is, or maybe it should be, because we need to understand as leaders how whatever the incident was, how did it impact everybody else? And we also don't know, some people that maybe are remotely involved might be significantly impacted. How do we find that out if we're not asking and we're not having those conversations?
I agree with that 100%. And I want to add a piece of this, which is, you are not responsible for how someone else feels. It is their responsibility for it. Does it impact it? Yes. But so often, I think we take responsibility and we take on other people's stuff when it's not ours to take on. And as leader and as leaders, that is so important to know. Where's that distinction between what is mine to take on in what is yours. I can have empathy for you. I can create grace for you. I can create that for myself. Amos, you can have grace for yourself for making that call because you knew that the call to her had to be made and the situation. So you can have grace for yourself for making that call and know that, there isn't necessarily, I love your definition of responsibility earlier, right? Like it is not always our responsibility to take on what others are feeling. We can be aware of it, yes, but they own what that is.
Yes, I think that is a wonderful point. Because we also, I mean, to your point, sometimes we can do things and say things in the workplace that have an impact that we never even foresaw that being an impact. And so if it's truth and it's done, with good intent and it negatively impacts somebody, you're absolutely right. That's not our responsibility. And I have witnessed people specifically with people issues where they kind of do take on, well, I think I hurt so-and-so's feelings. And so now I'm not going to talk to that person or.
Right. We're back to isolation.
Exactly. And I think also, I mean, on the isolation point, that is a key piece of this, that at any point along the way, we might try to isolate. And I think people do it on a regular basis without even thinking about it. They just, well, I'm just going to go off in my office and I'm going to get this done. It could be delegation issues. I can get it done faster by myself. I'll just lock the door to my office and I'll get it done. And I guess more than anything, out of all of this, one of the things that I continually come back to is one, being vulnerable with people, which is tough for me because when I say it's tough, it's becoming easier and easier because I think these stories need to be told and need to be talked about. But having that ability to, and realizing, and I'll be honest, I think that Monday morning was the first time in my life that I actually understood that there are things in this life that you can't do by yourself. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying people haven't helped me many, many, many times. And I recognize that, but it's the first time in my life that I realized, why am I trying to do this by myself? Why can't I reach out and get help from other people in areas? And this, not only with this incident, it came up, which, we're not recording the video on this, but you can see that I've moved some things around here. I have a friend here in town that they are a professional photographer and videographer. And it hit me, why am I fooling around trying to figure out how to set up my little studio here when I know somebody that is less than 5 minutes away that can come do it?
Right.
Because I was being stubborn and I said, I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to learn about it. I'm going to try this. I'm going to try that. I called him and he came and he spent 20 minutes here and he was like, oh, do this, this, and this. And you're going to be set. And we don't have it all done, but I reached out. I asked for help. You have a team for a reason. Reach out and ask for help.
Yeah. Dan Sullivan talks about being in your unique ability. And a key part of being a great leader is being in your unique ability and getting the people around you to do the things that are not your unique ability, yet they are theirs. And that unlocks so much energy and potential in you and in them. And, it brings forward the gratitude. It brings forward a higher quality of product, all of those things, and it's like, for your listeners, I love them to really think about, how do we pull in grace? What are those unique abilities that each member of my team have? Or what are things I'm doing that I shouldn't be doing? And let me go find that person. And now we're creating community within that when they're doing the thing that lights them up, it's giving them that satisfaction and allowing them to serve the purpose that they have as well.
Absolutely. The last thing I have is that one of the other things that kind of hit me was anytime you have an experience of any nature like this, you start to have some reflection time. And again, I'll be fully honest. This is probably the first time in my life that I stopped everything for more than 5 minutes. And I'm 45 years old, and I would like to think I have a good work-life balance. But what I recognized was that there were a lot of things that happen on a daily basis that no longer were important.
Yeah.
And as I am putting those things back into place, I'm questioning, I'm thinking, how important is this? Do I need to do this? But the other thing that you start to think about is, how might I change my life going forward? And I think it's a question everybody can ask on any given day, but I don't know where the quote came from. I just saw it within the past week, but how can you change your life if you don't change one thing you do every day? And so my question to everybody as I've been telling this story and talking with folks is, what are you going to start changing today to change something? It could be you want to lose 20 pounds. How are you going to do that unless you change the way you eat or you exercise or you got to change something? In business, I want to have a better high-performing team. Great. How are you going to do that? What are you personally going to change on a daily basis that's going to make that happen? I often have said in the pre-podcast session when I'm talking with people about our demographics of those that are listening, and I talk about the leaders that are out there that are absolutely sure that there's something wrong with everybody on their team, and they're looking for that next thing they're going to do for them. And we know that some of those people exist. And again, the challenge is look inward. What can you change that's going to help those people? What can you do differently today that might help you achieve what your goals are? Because if you don't change anything today going forward, you're going to get the same results.
Yeah. Responsibility. You just defined it perfectly.
So normally, I always end with 3 or 4 rapid fire questions. We already know the answers to your questions, but what do you, what are your last thoughts for our audience?
I'd love to ask you some rapid fire questions that I'm just going to come up with right now. How does that sound?
Okay, we'll give it a shot.
What is most important to you that you do every single day?
I would say I'm going to answer the question 2 ways. Prior to 2 weeks ago, I would have told you that one of the most important things I do every day is I read my Bible. After 2 weeks ago, one of the most important things I do every day is pray about what I've read in my Bible. Mm-hmm. And for those that maybe might be listening and think, well, I don't read the Bible. This is not my thing. My real point is you need to be intentional about what you're doing. I realized that there were some things that I did on a daily basis. And I'm not saying they weren't helpful, but at the same time, I was doing them, but I wasn't being intentional about what I was doing and taking in whatever it was. You can read a book or you can read a book intentionally. 2 different things.
Yeah. You notice one's in isolation and the other's in community?
Yep.
What are you most grateful for?
I am most grateful today for the community, the grace, and the love that I see that maybe I've never seen before. I think today that is one of the things I'm most grateful for. And I thank God every day for all of those great people, great things, the community that we have, because I wouldn't be getting better every day if it wasn't for the community.
Incredible. And how do you want to end our conversation today?
I think I would, really just like to end with those couple of challenges that we've talked about, challenging everybody to think about how they can bring grace into their daily activities, and challenge everybody on what is that one thing that you're going to change starting tomorrow. And I will add to that we all think, well, if I don't, I'll get that next week. I'll get to that tomorrow. I'll get to that next year. Well, we're getting close to the end of the year. I'll make it my New Year's resolution. And why? Why wait? If it's something that's going to make a positive change in your life, your team, your business, your church, whatever it is, why wait? If it's on your mind and you think it's something that's going to make a difference, start today.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you so much for having this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you for participating. And as I said at the beginning, for various reasons, this will be released at some point in time, but I don't know when it will be. But I just want everybody to understand that, kind of why we parted from what we normally do to, go down this road. And I encourage everybody, also think about all your communities and don't isolate. Be part of the community.
I want to timestamp this just so folks know. So we're recording this on September 10th of 2025. I don't think we've put a date in here as to when we're recording it. I do want to put that in there because I think later on that may be helpful.
Absolutely. Well, Traci, thank you so much. And actually, we didn't add in there, which we'll have in the show notes as well, but where can people get in touch with you?
Yeah. So we're at elevatedtalentconsulting.com and we are on LinkedIn at Traci Austin. That's where you can find us.
Awesome. Traci, thank you so much. And for our listeners, thank you for tuning in, for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, go back, check out our past episodes, and more to come in the future, but we appreciate all of you.